We're with Kathleen Romig, a senior policy analyst at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, a Washington think tank. Kathleen, big picture question here. Is Social Security on a path toward insolvency? And if so, why?
So Social Security is paid primarily through current tax dollars, and those tax dollars will continue to pay benefits up until about 2029, 2034, depending on who's doing the estimating. And then at that point, Social Security's trust fund reserves will become depleted, and that's another way of saying insolvent. But that doesn't mean that Social Security will be bankrupt. It means that Social Security won't be able to pay full benefits out of those current taxes. It'll be able to pay about 75% of current benefits out of current taxes. And at that point, or hopefully before that point, policymakers will figure out how to either spend less or take in more to the system so that we don't reach that point.
Okay. And another question here. Social Security for most people means monthly checks to older Americans. But it's more than that, right? Tell me a little bit more about the other elements.
It is more than that. So it is true, 97% of elderly Americans receive Social Security at some point, but about 1 in 5 Social Security beneficiaries are younger than retirement age. And they either have become disabled over the course of their working career, or they died prematurely, and their survivors, either their spouses or their children, get benefits from Social Security.
Okay, and what are the biggest drivers of growth in the program? Yeah. Is it the old age checks or the survivor benefits and disability benefits?
Well, in the past decade or two, the biggest growth was the disability insurance program as the baby boomers age into their late 50s and early 60s and reach those peak disability years. But now, for the past several years, the biggest driver of growth is the retirement program, because for the same reason, the baby boomers are aging into their 60s and even into their 70s, into those peak retirement years.
Okay. Now you said a couple minutes ago that that hopefully by 2029 or 2034, Congress will figure out what to do to address the long-term projections for the program. What are the different levers that they could pull to help change those projections?
Well, it's fairly simple. They either have to have less money going out of the system or more money going into the system. And there are a myriad ways to do either one of those things. But two of the most frequently looked at policies are on the revenue side, increasing the taxes paid by the highest income beneficiaries, who, or I should say taxpayers, who only pay Social Security tax up to about $125,000, maybe increasing that cap so they pay on a higher portion of their earnings, or raising the full retirement age, which is essentially an across-the-board benefit cut for all beneficiaries.
And who in Congress advocates the first position? Who advocates the second?
So the Democrats in Congress tend to lean more heavily on the revenue side, and they're also looking at expanding Social Security benefits on top of, filling the hole for the trust funds right now. And then the Republicans tend to talk about decreasing the amount of benefits.
Okay. Now you said hopefully they'll figure out what to do by 2029.
Yeah.
How hopeful are you?
I think it's quite certain that they'll figure it out before the trust fund becomes insolvent. The last time this happened was in 1983. It was actually quite down to the wire. It was a few months before a reduced check would go out. But Congress tends to act pretty quickly when it comes to their best voters, older voters, and a very important part of their monthly pocketbook. And so I'm pretty confident that they will act before the 11th hour.
And in 1983, when they did go down to the wire, did the checks that people were already receiving, were those changed at all, or is it just future checks?
Future checks. So the disaster was averted in 1983, and nobody was harmed. And I assume that the same will be true this next round.
Okay, and finally, right now, is there any legislation on the Hill to address the shortfalls? Any legislation that has any kind of traction to it?
Not any legislation that has any kind of traction. So President Trump has promised that he will not touch Social Security, and for the most part, except for some changes that he proposed to disability insurance in his budget, he's stuck to that. And I think that Congress is more or less following his lead. There are a couple of bills out there, but they don't seem very viable.